If you thought you could just walk into any national park and just be like, hey, I'm here, I want to check out Angel's Landing, I want to check out the wave. No, girl. I am here to tell you there is a lot more you need to know about going to a national park. Like Angel's Landing has a difficulty scale of like a 3 on the Yosemite decimal system. Then there's the wave, which you actually can't get in unless you enter a lottery, and then it's like, good luck getting in there. So I have a lot to go over in this video. Because of that, I'm going to break it up into 6 parts. So stay with me to the end because I have a lot to cover and you're going to need to know all of this information because Zion National Park is massive. It's not this just walk in and see it in a day kind of park. You're going to need gas. You're going to need so much gas throughout this whole travel experience. You're going to be driving through the desert. Make sure your car does not overheat. You're gonna need coolant, things like this. There are going to be bugs on the window. Think of all these different scenarios while you're picking out the car that you are going to be driving in. I really recommend doing a 4-wheel drive. We had a Jeep, and the only thing with the Jeep is the bugs just kind of slam into the window, but we did come up with a great way to get them off. So when you go to a gas station, unfortunately, the squeegee is not going to get the bugs off because the thing is the bug like hits your window and then it immediately dries because you're in this like 120 degrees of the desert. So what we found worked was alcohol. We had some rum in the car, so we just put it on a sock and we were able to like scrub down the windshield. So that's a good tip for you if you want to have alcohol in the car and a sock, or if you want to do a rag, and I'm sure Windex would work a lot better. We were just kind of like on the fly trying to clean the windshield, so that's what worked for us. But keep that in mind, you're going to be clearing a lot of bug and the windshield wipers are not going to get rid of it because it does get caked on there. So you just need something to like get rid of the bugs so you can see out the window. Jumping back to gas, keep in mind that you're going to be going uphill a lot, so that kind of like burns more gasoline. And also, a lot of these towns are just these little podunk towns in the middle of nowhere. Everything closes early, so it could be a good like 60 miles to the next town, so you don't want to push it. I would suggest once you hit that like halfway tank mark, just go ahead and refill again because you want to have a full tank. You never know how far the next town is going to be. Even when you put it in GPS and stuff, you might get caught up driving and you don't think to be like, oh, we should probably stop for gas because the next town is not for like an hour. So just make sure you have enough gas because this was a big thing when we were driving. We always made sure we had enough gas and we were fine, but we did like hear different people at the different gas stations be like, oh my gosh, we were almost out of gas. We were freaking out. So this is just another reminder, make sure you got that gas. Another thing to think about when you're picking a car is remember that a white car reflects light, so it's going to be blinding going back to the car once you've been hiking out in the middle of the sun and everything. So I would suggest a color other than white because this is going to like blind you when you go back to your car. We had a white car that parked right next to us and we kind of had to go back to the car like this. It was reflecting all the light right into our eyes. My next tip for driving out to the national parks is to watch out for those small little towns. As I said, you're gonna be on the highway going like 75, maybe you're speeding, you're going like, 85, 90, depending on where you are. And then all of a sudden it's like 50 and then 25. And guess what? Those cops are waiting right there for you to come around the corner because once it hits that 25, they're gonna clock you, or once it hits that 55 or 50, they're gonna clock you for like 10 miles over the speed limit. So just keep an eye out for those mile-per-hour signs. Keep an eye out on your GPS if you can. You know how it always says how much the miles per hour are on the GPS, but I guarantee there will be a cop in every small town that you come across, so just go the speed limit when you see the miles per hour change. This next tip has to do with things you're going to encounter while you're driving. So if it's raining in the desert, you might be surprised to see that the tarantulas are gonna come out. So on the side of the road, you might see some like dead tarantulas that are either hanging out there or they're actually dead. The rain gets them out from their hole and they will come to the road to seek refuge. So while you're driving, you may see some of these after a heavy rainstorm. You're going to see some like sandstorms. They look like tornadoes and they'll like whip around in a corner. You'll probably see those out in the middle of the desert. You don't see them so much on the road itself. You're going to be driving through a lot of like wild herds. So it's just like open pastures for cows. So be careful because the cows may try to cross the street. So similarly, you're going to be going over these grates in the road that are made for cattle crossing and stuff like that. You might see wild horses. Just keep your eye on the road, guys, because there could be a lot of things that are going to run out in front of you, especially at night. The elk are notorious for coming out at night, and they'll just come and hang out in the middle of the road and just stand there for some reason. I don't know why, but we definitely saw one that was sitting on the road. Very bizarre. I was like, why did you choose right there to sit? We were the only car on the road for like miles and miles, so I understand maybe it's warm or something, but there are going to be elk in random places, especially at night, and early in the morning as well is when the elks come out. If you're looking for goats up on the mountains, they usually come out earlier on in the day or like as the sun is going down. But most people told us to look for them in the morning. That's when they see them the most. If it's windy, you're also going to come across some tumbleweeds. Like we had one that was again sitting right in the middle of the road. I don't know why stuff liked to jump out in the middle of the road at us. I guess it was just our thing. While you're driving, you may lose service. So I suggest if you have some turns and things coming up, honestly, most of the drive is just straight. So if you lose service, it's only momentarily and then you're gonna regain service again, especially when you're on those desert roads. But you may wanna just screenshot your GPS just in case you don't wanna get off course, especially if you're coming up to one of those small towns, so you don't lose where you're going. But otherwise, you could just follow the signs to stay on the main road because chances are you're probably gonna take that highway all the way out to Zion National Park. And my last tip for driving before we move into the hiking tips is, especially when you get close to Antelope Canyon, there are a lot of time zone changes, guys. I don't know what happens out there. It feels like you're time traveling. The way that we had worked it out when we were on our way to Antelope Canyon, in our minds, we were gonna get there like an hour early. We ended up there 2 hours early somehow, and we only discovered that because we stopped as a visitor center and they had 3 clocks on the wall that showed all the different time zones. So it gets really tricky when you're in like that Utah, Arizona, Nevada area. Like it gets really tricky out there. So I would suggest just stopping at a visitor center and just bring an old watch or just buy one at, Walmart or whatever for $5, just so you have something that you know what time it is wherever you're going. That way, when your GPS and your clock in your car and the clock on your phone is different than the person in front of you's phone, like our phones were like, I'm telling you, it gets crazy out there. That way, when your GPS is saying it's in 40 minutes and then all of a sudden it's in 10 minutes, you're just kind of like, oh wait, we went through a time zone, or like, did we take the wrong way, or what's going on? That way you have a little bit of clarity in those hectic moments when you're just following the GPS and zoning out on those long drives. Now let's talk about hiking tips. I'm gonna come at you from a non-hiker perspective. I learned a lot of this stuff from my friend that I was with, so he kind of gave us hiking 101 before we went out to the national parks. But hiking in the national parks, especially in Utah, Nevada, Arizona area, it's a lot of sand. So he told me it was okay to like wear tennis shoes, but he didn't tell me that all the sand was going to go into my tennis shoes. So this is where a lot of people wear hiking boots, because the boots will keep all the sand out. And trust me when I say, when you're walking in these like 110-degree weather hikes, your feet, the last thing you want is some sand like rubbing against your toes, getting in your socks, stuff like that. So if you want to do hiking boots, go for it. That will alleviate all of your problems. If you don't have hiking boots, no problem. Bring extra socks. I went through so many socks, guys. Every time I hiked, I literally had to turn my shoe upside down because there was so much sand in it. And keep in mind, if you are wearing tennis shoes, you're probably going to have to throw them away by the end of it, just because it's going to be impossible to clean them, guys. Like I'm telling you, my shoes, I wish I would have taken a before and after photo. I didn't think of it. I'll try to find one and put it in here, but they were just like covered in sand, and there was no coming back. I just threw them away. Other people I saw wearing like hiking sandals. So if you're not worried about the sand and stuff, you can wear hiking sandals, especially in that heat. But again, you have to deal with like the dirty feet and have something in the car to at least like wipe them off, because it's so uncomfortable when you're driving and you're just kind of like itchy. You know what I'm saying? Also keep in mind, as I keep saying, a lot of times it's like 110 degrees. So the sand is also hot. So if you choose to wear sandals and there's little rocks, they're not cold rocks, they're going to be hot and the sand is also hot. So just keep that in mind, guys. The heat will get to you. While you're hiking and maybe you're kind of getting a little off track, keep an eye out for little rock formations, or for example, when we went to the dinosaur tracks, they actually circled the dinosaur tracks for us, so we were able to easily find them. And, just as a thank you to whoever did it before you, if you see that the rocks are starting to blow away, Feel free to like get some more rocks and make a new circle so the next people that come up can see them. But having that little rock formation, or even seeing these along the trail, it's like, oh, you're going the right way. Especially in the heat, you're just kind of like, oh, are we there yet? And then you see that little glimpse of hope. So if you have a chance, or you could even put them up yourself, make those little totem pole things, but it's a really nice gesture and it's fun. It was fun for me while hiking. Maybe all hikers do this, I don't know, I'm like a beginner hiker, but I thought that was a really cool thing. A lot of times when you're hiking as well, even if you have kind of like a small backpack or something, it gets kind of heavy as you're walking, or if you're trying to climb, it gets a little cumbersome. So I suggest having pockets in pants. Like when we were traveling, I had one of those little MGM bottles, so that just fit right in my pocket and I was able to just carry that with me. I also did bring my over-the-shoulder pack, so I was able to put a little bottle in there, and it was light enough that I didn't really feel the heaviness of it. While you're hiking too, it might be the altitude changes. You are going up mountains as you're driving, as you're hiking, so the altitude is constantly changing. You're going to see altitude signs all over the roads. So you might be going up or down altitudes, then you're like hiking up a hill, which could be, you know, a few hundred feet depending on where you're going. So that altitude change could affect you. For the most part, I think you'll be fine, but if you do start to feel altitude sickness, I feel like that's more for like the higher of the altitudes, more like, you know, 10,000 feet or something. But they suggest that you just go back down and don't even try to go up. They say that altitude changes can affect different people different ways, and altitude sickness, you may have it the first day, but not the second day. So maybe just come back to that location, especially one of those free locations where it's right around the corner from your hotel. You could easily just go there the next day instead and see if you don't respond in the same manner. When we went to Horseshoe Bend, it was so breezy and dusty down there. So I saw a lot of people wearing like face masks to keep the sand out of their face. I ended up having a hat on that I had to take off because it was so windy, it kept blowing off my hair, and I had to, like, it kept getting caught in my ponytail. A lot of people had those big sun hats. They kept blowing off and they would chase after them. So I would suggest just wearing like sunglasses to protect your eyes. I would suggest if you need to keep your hair out of your face, wear like a bandana. A lot of people had just like the headbands, or they would do the whole bandana, but most people just had that like sweat headband thing, and that seemed to keep people's hair out of their eyes, so you could do that. At first I was nervous of like ticks and things, but my friend had said they don't really have ticks out west, especially in the desert and stuff. They do have scorpions and rattlesnakes that you need to watch out for. But for the most part, as long as you have higher socks, you should be good. So you can wear shorts and a tank top. That was something that I ended up doing. I kind of went in being like, oh, I need to be completely covered. And then I quickly was like, it's too hot, I'm wearing shorts. This is how I am going to go hiking for the rest of these trips. And my last tip for hiking in the national parks is, as you're going up and down the different hills and things, try and walk sideways or like at a angle like this. Your feet will catch more traction versus trying to go this way. You're probably going to slide. So what I found is I either went side to side like a skier kind of thing, or I did this way, one in front of the other, and kind of like went down that way. And that was the easiest way for me personally. Hopefully that would help you as a new hiker as well. There's so many different techniques, but that was just something I wanted to throw in there before I move into our next section, which is dealing with the heat of the desert. If you do start to get too hot and just feel like really hot and a little lightheaded, what I would suggest doing is putting water on your wrist or on your elbow. These are like the quickest areas for you to cool off, and putting water there naturally kind of cools you off, especially on the back of the neck as well. This is another reality of hiking the things around Zion National Park, is you are in the desert. You're in the sand. That heat is relentless. There is no overhead covers or things like that. Well, something like Horseshoe Bend did have a couple areas where you could stop and like take cover under like a shaded area. But for the most part, you're just out in nature and it's just like a free-for-all. It's not like those parks back home where it's like, oh, this is, you know, you can take your kids on this and it's fine. No, you need to know exactly what you're getting into, and that's part of the reason I wanted to make this video, because I didn't know to this extent what hiking in a national park was. So I hope this video is helping you so far. Take a minute to hit that like if it is helping you, and know that it is hot out there, but you can still do it. You can still push through, but do not overexert yourself. I want to over exaggerate this point. Do not overexert yourself. If you feel like you cannot make it, that is okay. You can turn around, go back to the car, cool off, put your air conditioning on, because the last thing you want to do is overheat in the middle of nowhere. Maybe somebody may stumble upon you eventually, but there is a lot of deaths in the national parks like every year. Here is a statistic for Zion National Park itself. A lot of people think they're invincible, but the reality is the sun is going to get to you and you don't even realize how much water is evaporating from your body. So you don't even sweat because it's so hot that once you sweat, it immediately evaporates. So one of the things that I found that helped me was I would just chug water the whole ride. Yes, I had to pee a lot, but obviously it's more water than I usually ingest. So I found that once I had a good 3 bottles of water in me, I was able to handle the heat a lot better versus me trying to drink while I'm already hot, if that makes sense, because I feel like your body already has the water that it needs to get through the hike versus trying to make up for lost water when you've already lost a lot of water. Before you let yourself get to that level of dehydration, just overhydrate. Your body is literally going to be like, okay, I can't drink any more water. And that's when you stop. Don't stop drinking water until you have that part of your body be like, okay, we're good. I can't drink any more water now. Just keep chugging the whole trip. You'd be surprised how much water you're going to go through, but every time you're in the car, just drink as much water as you can. Again, I want to announce this, put it all out there, drink as much water as you can while you're out in the desert. You also may have the thought cross your mind that, oh, it's better for water to be room temperature than to drink it cold because, it goes into my body easier. Again, you're in the middle of the desert. The air conditioning is not on while you're hiking. So when you come back to the car is going to be hot. It's going to be super hot, really, really hot. If you have time to get one of those window cover things, do it because it's going to be so hot when you get back to the car. But I digress. So the water is also going to be as hot. If it's going to feel like boiling water basically. So get one of those cheap coolers from Walmart. I think we got one for $5. Filled it up with ice, which was $1. And it honestly, that cooler held that water and held that ice for our whole trip. It would last a whole day. It was kind of crazy. But those coolers are really good. It was just one of those styrofoam coolers, you know what I mean? But it worked really good. It kept the water cool. And the water that I did not have in the cooler will burn your mouth, just to warn you. One thing that we did that I suggest you do if you have the time or have the patience is go to Las Vegas first. It's only about a 3.5-4 hour drive from Vegas to Zion National Park. And of course, all along the way, there are plenty of places for you to stop and have a good time and all that fun stuff. But if you stay in Las Vegas one night, that will help to kind of get you used to the heat, get you used to the altitude change. So once you have a day in, the next day is going to be a lot easier as you're going even higher up in altitude. And then again, once you're in Zion National Park, you'll sleep there for a day. Altitude will affect you differently. Similarly, the heat will start to not affect you as much because you've already been out in it a couple days. So your body has started to adjust. So you will find you won't need as much water as maybe you did the first couple days because you've been chugging so much water. So also your body has more water retention in it. Just try to plan your trip out versus just, hey, we're in Zion Park, we have to do everything all in a day. No, the reality is Zion Park is so big, you're not going to be able to do everything all in a day. It's better to break it up and actually enjoy the things that you're doing. And my last tip for dealing with the heat in Zion National Park is watch your phone battery, guys. Don't leave it out in the sun when you're in the car. Try to keep it in the shade. That battery is going to overheat. Similarly, when you're walking around, try and keep it in a pocket, or they actually make some phone cases that will keep your battery cool in the heat, because if you're out with your phone the whole time filming and everything or taking photos, it's going to die by the time you get to the top of the hill. So just keep that in mind. Keep your battery fully charged at all times, especially while you're driving. You can just plug it in, should be good. But once that battery starts to die, you'll miss that iconic photo that you wish you had at the top of the hill, at the top of the hike. For example, we made the mistake at the sand caves. You can check out this video about the sand caves. But we were looking all around. There was nobody around really that would tell us how to get up there. So we went way off track. We were hiking for an hour
all
before
these
we realized you literally get out of your car and just walk up to the hill and you just go right up the hill. Like, it was that easy. We ended up following a family with kids, and that's how we were able to find the way up to the sand cave. So that's a good tip too. If you're hiking and you feel like you're doing something wrong, just follow the family, because they probably know exactly where they're going. They're not going to drag their kids around everywhere in the desert, so follow the family. But what I was going to say was I did have full battery still by the time I got to the top of the hill, because I had my battery fully charged and I had it in my pocket, or in my my over the shoulder, so I was good to go. And I took plenty of photos and plenty of video, which you can check out in that video. Let's move on to part 4, which is National Park Essentials. This is more like for any national park, but I'll focus mostly on Zion National Park since that's where I was. But as I said before, the wave, you're going to need a reservation, which is a lottery reservation. So the wave is one of those things you need to do your research beforehand. Same with, I had mentioned Angel's Landing, that it's a really hard hike. So I wouldn't have known any of that stuff unless I did research beforehand. And there is a lot of areas that are like this. So what you can do is do research on other blogs and things about the national parks, or you could even look at reviews. Like, for example, people will say how hard the hike is or how their 5-year-old was able to do it, stuff like this. And then you'll know it's a pretty easy hike. Or people will say, hey, why don't you go at sunset because it's not as hot out, it's easier to do the hike. All these little tidbits of knowledge that are kind of scattered throughout the internet, take advantage of them, because the worst thing you want to do is be in the middle of the desert at like 1 p.m. and be like, oh, I could have done this hike at 6 o'clock and it would have been a lot more enjoyable if I thought about that and thought about how the sunset would look over Horseshoe Bend or something like that. The other reality of hiking a national park is you need a reservation now. After COVID, a lot of stuff has changed. You can't just like walk into Zion National Park anymore. They're also trying to keep a lot of cars off the road, because after COVID, it became really popular to go to Zion National Park. So they're trying to control the traffic of people. So you will need a reservation to get into the actual park itself. It is free after, I think, 5 or 6 o'clock. So you can drive into Zion Park and look around and go to the brewery. The scenic drive, you still need a reservation for. So that area you won't be able to get into without a reservation. Things like Antelope Canyon, we needed a reservation. To do a Milky Way viewing, we needed a reservation and tickets. Antelope Canyon, we needed tickets too. But the thing is, you don't just like drive up to places and be like, hey, I'm here, I get to see it. Like, there are some places like that, but a lot of these places now require a ticket or a reservation. So just do your research beforehand, which you're doing right now, so you're doing a great job so far. With reservations, Saturdays and Sundays are obviously higher important days, so you're probably gonna have to do like months out in advance, or you aren't going to be able to get a reservation on a Saturday or Sunday, depending on what time of the year you're booking. I suggest if you plan to go to Zion National Park, you gotta do it months out in advance to make all your reservations and tickets. Not so much with like where you're gonna stay, but the park itself, you need to book it months in advance. The worst is to drive all the way there and you're only able to see like a couple of things and you aren't able to get into the main things you wanted to see because you weren't able to get a reservation day of. But that being said, keep in mind also that people do cancel reservations. So if you find yourself with some free time and you just want to like give it a try to get into a place, you might get lucky and find out that somebody has canceled their reservation and you can slide in on that spot. So keep that in mind too. Don't lose all hope. I'm just like, if you plan it months in advance, you'll definitely get to the things you definitely want to see. And then everything else can kind of be like, go with the flow, see if you make it or not. And a note for booking online, these things sell out like in a minute. Like they're so popular, especially during certain times of the year. So you don't want to refresh the page. You need to stay on the page until the time they go on sale. You got to hit that like button, like purchase at the time that they go on. And again, don't refresh the page because you're not going to get it back on the page because there's so many other people trying to get on the page. So these were like the key things that we did that got us a lot of the reservations. We were actually surprised we were able to get so many because a lot of them, they timed out like as soon as the reservations were on. So just keep that in mind. Don't refresh the page. Hit that button as soon as it is the time to do it. When you're out at the places that have a lot of fossilized things, I suggest bringing a lot of water because you can see the fossil a lot easier when you pour a little water on it. That was a great tip that I got from actually researching because somebody else had done that in their trip up there, and I was like, oh my gosh, I can see it so much better, and the photos came out so much better. So thanks to whoever that was that made that. I'll go back and find you and put you here. But that tip was really good, and thank you for that. When you do go on one of these reservations or one of these tours, a lot of them don't allow you to bring a bag with you, so you'll need to have like a clear bag or like a small pouch kind of thing. They have to be a certain size. So again, just make sure you do your research with that because every tour company is different depending on where you're going. So keep that in mind just so you don't plan to like bring this big bag and then you have to like leave it somewhere. I also suggest that you print off your reservations just in case we have that friendly no service thing, which is notorious in the desert. That way you at least have a paper copy. Most places they should have your name, but in case they ask for a QR code or something or the email reservation, this way you have it printed out so you can just hand it over to them. Or you could even screenshot it. And my last tip for hiking before we move on to where to stay around Zion National Park is that there are extreme temperature changes, guys. Depending on what you're doing and where you're going, the top of the mountain is going to be cold, the bottom of the mountain is going to be hot. So you're going from 112 to maybe you're doing the Milky Way viewing, it is like 60 degrees, 70 degrees, which maybe like 80 degrees doesn't seem like hot to you, but when you're going from 112 down to like 70 or 80, it's going to be freezing. So trust me when I say bring pants, bring a sweater, bring a jacket even. Like those North Face ones are really nice. They keep you warm and cool, but it's going to be cold. And even though the Milky Way viewings, they'll offer you like a blanket, it's going to be freezing. And also you're going to want to sit on a blanket too. So like it just gets cold. You want to have your hands free. You want to like listen and do things. The last thing you want to be doing is trying to stay warm while you're trying to hear the ranger talk about the Milky Way, which this is like a blackout zone and it's a once in a lifetime opportunity. And here you are just being like, I'm cold. And it's like the whole Milky Way is above your head. Let's talk about lodging and what you're going to need in your hotel room after you've been hiking all day. Poopery, guys. Poopery comes in handy. And keep in mind, after you've been hiking, you're gonna be covered in sand and itchy and things. So you're gonna wanna shower every day. Just make sure you wash your feet, especially because you never know what's been blowing around. It's better just wash it all off your body. And a lot of people think that there are only campgrounds around, but there are actually a lot of motels and hotels within an hour, I would say, of Zion National Park. If you do a campground, they do have showers. It's usually like full functioning facilities. So camping is fun. If you're into camping, there are plenty of cool places to camp. We went with a couple different hotels. One was in Kanab and the other one was in Springdale. So you can check out those videos in my Las Vegas road trips playlist. Kind of gives you an idea of all the different experiences I had at different places and also the places that we stayed. The one in Springdale was awesome because they had this amazing pool. I was all about it, but unfortunately we were like, we didn't come here to sit in the pool, we came here to hike, so we went out back to Zion that day. But if we would have planned it better, we would have got back to the hotel sooner and been able to enjoy it. Take advantage of the amenities at different hotels and things, especially when it is 112 outside. You're going to love being in a pool at that time of day. And after you've been hiking all day, you can go back and soak your feet and stuff in the hot tub. And that being said, Kanab was like this really cute little town with a lot of history. That's actually where they had a lot of Western movies filmed in that area and stuff. So that was really cool to see. They had little posters everywhere that said the history of the city. And then also in Springdale, it was so pretty. Like, this was a fun little hippy dippy town that I would love to go back to sometime. Zion Park Brewery was like right around the corner over there. So there's a lot of things to explore besides just the park. The little towns around the park are just as fun as the park itself. Where originally when we were planning this trip, I didn't know really what I was getting into. I was like, are we gonna have to sleep in the car or are we gonna be camping? Like, what is it like out in the middle of nowhere? There are actually hotels there, so don't worry, girls. You can sleep in a hotel and still see the beauty that a national park has to offer. Now let's move into the sixth section, which is my bonus tips. So while you're at the hotel, take some of that toilet paper because it is all porta potties out around Zion National Park. Like when you go out to the toadstools, porta potty, like even the horseshoe bend, It's a porta potty. It's a nice porta potty, but it's still like a porta potty. And sometimes they run out of toilet paper, especially popular times of the day, stuff like that. So keep that in mind. You could keep some hand sanitizer in the car with you. You know, these are things to think of. It is still out in the middle of nature. So in that aspect, toilet paper, hand sanitizer, you know, that sort of stuff. As I said earlier, keep in mind what time of day that you're gonna go. So if it's something like Horseshoe Bend, obviously like sun up or sundown is going to be super beautiful versus, you know, just in the middle of the hot day when you're just walking straight into the desert. Something like Toadstools is probably better early morning or later in the day, so you're not just walking in the heat of the desert. Same with the dinosaur tracks. So things like that, try to maybe do lunch in that time period so you're escaping that midday sun. However, if you're going out to like a cave, like Belly of the Dragon, or you're going out to Antelope Canyon, something like that, it doesn't really matter if you're there at that time of the day because you're inside a cave, so you're not going to feel the heat of the desert as much because in the caves, it's probably like 50 degrees or so. Also, that's another thing to keep in mind. Depending on where you're going, there will be temperature changes. I just want to warn you, so you might need to bring a jacket because it is cold in the caves. Antelope Canyon wasn't that cold, like it was pretty decent, but if you go deeper down into some of these caves, it gets pretty cold. This is probably the best bonus tip I could possibly give you, but something as simple as signing up for an email list or checking for deals online, coupon codes, that sort of thing, you can get so much money off of tickets and reservations. So I really suggest just scouring the internet for promo codes. There are a lot of them for the national parks, and a lot of them you just have to join the email list or something for the national park that you're going to. So keep that in mind. There are ways to get tickets for cheaper, so look into that before you go ahead and hit that purchase. Especially Antelope Canyon, Milky Way viewings. And when you go to a Milky Way viewing, here's another tip: use a red light because your eyes actually adjust to the dark better with a red light than trying to use your phone light or something like that. I saw a lot of people with those like cave lights and they just had a red light on them so they could look down as they walk, instead of just like fumbling around in the dark like most of us were. I can go on and on and on talking about Zion National Park, but instead of doing that, just check out this playlist here. You'll be able to see all the different experiences I had, and I go into detail with each video, more in-depth tips for different destinations. So make sure you check out that playlist next, and I'll see you over there.